I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them.
How we doing, my guy? We are back. Another episode of Another Day in Fantasy Podcast brought to you by Bite Size Sports. I'm Dan. We got Trevor here, and we're talking redraft quarterbacks tonight, as well as some draft strategy. This weekend's a big one, man.
Yeah, it's the one of the biggest draft weekends of the preseason, and obviously most people want to get them in before Labor Day weekend, but also try to wait as long as possible. So should be a really fun weekend. You got any drafts going on? I've got a few this week.
Yes, I have two this weekend, two big ones. My family league, we're getting together on Saturday about 11 a.m. Everyone's bringing some food. I got the charred wings I'm coming in with, so I'm pumped for that. And then on Sunday, I got the high school league. It's 10-man keeper. I'm defending champ in that one. So, got to hold it down. Got Garrett Wilson I'm keeping in the 13th round. A lot of value there.
So sick.
So feeling pretty good.
I need to get into a league that I can just have keepers with my late drafts. Because I love taking shots in the dark, especially those rookie wide receivers. You hit with a guy like Garrett Wilson, that's literally a first round pick. Maybe front end of the second round that you're getting in round 13. That's just not fair, man.
The players, I will say the other teams keeping players. They're keeping some quality players too, right? Like Chase is a 4th round pick. Justin Jefferson's a similar situation where he went undrafted our first year. And now dude's been keeping him for a 16th, 15th, 14th, and now 13th pick. And this is the final year that he can keep him. So it's been kind of crazy seeing everything play out like that. My little brother's keeping Jalen Hurts in the 7th round. I think that's insane value. All kinds of crazy stuff going on there.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty fun league. I like leagues with just different rules, not too much. Don't get crazy, but have a little bit of a different concept to it. I'm in a 3-keeper league, but it's just like straight up your first 3 picks. It's not anything special like that. And then we've got our Kansas City, a bunch of people I grew up with that all live in Kansas City now. We'll get together. I'm hosting this year, so
yeah.
Looks like rain Sunday, so maybe get together in the old basement and eat a little bit, drink a little bit, and draft some fantasy football, man. It'll be a good time. And this is the first league that I've been in that has a live draft. We've done it for a couple of years now, but it's just different when you're live drafting. That's for sure.
It's so much more fun, man. I love it. It takes a little bit longer, obviously, but It's so much more fun. You just get to chirp your buddies, chirp your brothers and cousins if they're making picks. Every year we do my family draft. It's basically a reunion because all of us get together for a live draft, and it's like, you sure about that? Someone put somebody on the board. You got to razz them a little bit. It's fun.
Absolutely. We'll talk some draft strategy here towards the end. So if you are with us tonight, make sure you obviously hit that like button, subscribe to Bite Size Sports on YouTube, but also throw in some draft strategy questions if you got them in the chat. If you're listening to the audio afterwards, hit us up on Twitter at TrevorS_FF and at Dan_TF40. Hit us up. We'll answer your questions on Twitter. We'll answer your questions live tonight if you throw them in the chat. But first, we got some news, right? Let's quite a bit of news. It's that time of year, man. It's like,
I know.
It's not just like, so and so's hurt. It's like so and so might be traded. What's going on, Dan?
It's serious stuff. We'll start with the injuries. We'll start with the who's going to get hurt kind of thing. DJ Shark had a hamstring tweak. Nothing too serious yet from that. A couple other ones to monitor for sure. JSN, receiver out in Seattle, broken wrist bone. Going to be out 3 to 4 weeks. Probably miss maybe first week, 2 weeks of the season. Awful timing. This happens back in, late July. Then he's good to go for the start of the season. So a little bit of a bummer there, but, expect Metcalf and Lockett to sort of pick it up a little bit those first couple weeks. And then Devon A-Chain, shoulder injury in that preseason game, day to day though. So nothing too crazy. He got carted off Ian Rappaport scared everybody with A-Chain carted off, but turns out it's just something, something minor, something. And he had a big lineman fall. I don't know if you saw the video, but that was a big old boy fell on him.
Yeah,
So
and A-Chain's a little old guy. He is not a very big one. Yeah, I love the tweets are something else right now. Like anybody gets carted off the field these days. Truly. Like it's just what they do. If you're injured, they're gonna throw you on a cart, wheel your ass out off the field. Like, so to get that every time you're like, oh, what does carted off mean? Right? Is that
right?
I just need to go get some x-rays, or is that, laying in pain with a knee or an issue with that? So,
right.
Happy to see it's day to day. I expect we'll see A-Chain early in this season for sure.
Absolutely. I come to find that carted off carries a little more weight if it's during a game.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Oh, man. Do we have to talk about this? We have to talk about Trey Lance being quarterback 3 for the San Francisco
quarterback
49ers.
week. It is quarterback
what is going
week.
on?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
RIP to my Trey Lance shares in Dynasty football, but
I don't know. Like, pick up some Sam Darnold shares.
Yeah. If you're out there, you're listening, you're like, what are you guys talking about? Sam Darnold named the number 2 quarterback there in San Francisco, obviously leaving Brock Purdy as the starter and Trey Lance left out, essentially, right? Like he's left out. What do you think? I'm the Trey Lance homer. Like I have it's the system. It's, put him in an offense like the Philadelphia or, Indianapolis now with Shane Steichen, and he'll be great. But I'm the homer. So I want to hear from you. What do you think Trey Lance's next steps are in his career? And will he ever be the top 3 pick that he was drafted at?
Honestly, at this point, I think the ship sailed for him to be the guy. Like, you know what I mean? There wasn't a lot of, he had a lot of hype coming out from the draft, but there was a lot of skepticism about the level of competition that he faced in college and how that would translate to the pros. I was optimistic that he is going to come in and perform. I think a lot of it's been a string of bad luck that's kind of put him in this position where, Brock Purdy got an opportunity, he shined, and he's not losing that opportunity because of the poise and skill that he has. And, I kind of saw it coming after we saw what we saw from Brock Purdy last year. The thing is with Trey Lance is they gave up so much capital for him. That was the big question for me, right? Because they essentially traded 3 first-round picks and another mid-round pick to get him with Miami. Miami made out like a bandit in that deal. But, I think it's going to be a situation where he has to have a revitalization. I've already seen some rumors about teams that are interested. In particular, it's teams that maybe have a quarterback that's on their way out of town. Minnesota being a namely one right there. Kirk Cousins is in his mid-30s now. He's been signing, just little extensions here and there to maintain his position in Minnesota, and they haven't been able to get over the hump in the playoffs. So, his only real opportunity to shine and gain that spotlight back is to get put in a position kind of like what Brock Purdy was put in this year, where it comes down to maybe an injury or something that catapults him up there.
Yeah, and I really do think, I think he's more talented than Jimmy Garoppolo. If you watch some tape or if you do the measurables, whatever you want, I think he's more talented than Jimmy Garoppolo. And but Jimmy G understood the offense. Whereas
right.
I don't think Trey Lance picked it up as well. And it does sound like it's a pretty significant, maybe a little bit more difficult than most NFL offenses. That's just from what I've read in the tea leaves, right? So maybe it is, maybe it's not. I do think that I haven't seen it, but maybe the Rams with Matt Stafford getting older, maybe he can go play with Sean McVay. Is Geno Smith going to be a long-time starter? I think there's going to be potential options. Obviously, Tampa Bay has got a bunch of has-beens out there running around right now. So, there could be options out there. But, man, it feels like it's probably over, like at this point for Trey Lance.
And I think those two destinations make a lot of sense, but like, is a division rival going to trade a QB prospect to one of their other rivals? Yeah. Like, I don't know that that's going to happen with the Rams and the Seahawks, but those destinations would make a ton of sense, right? I mean, I've seen crazier things happen. Interdivision
He's in
trades
his
happen.
third year.
So
they only have him for 2 more years, and then they have an option for the 5th year.
This would be his, because he was 2021 class.
Yeah. So they could probably just cut him too if it came down to it.
If they had to.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But I brought up Tampa Bay. We can talk about them. Baker Mayfield will be one of the has-beens starting there in Tampa. He does win the starting job over Kyle Trask. Does this do anything for you fantasy-wise? Maybe not with Baker, but even with like a Godwin or Mike Evans?
Honestly, I was staying far away from that entire offense. Even Rashad White, who I think has potential to have a good season. They have a good offensive line. I don't know. I just don't. They got rid of Byron Leftwich. They have a totally new offensive system coming into play. I mean, you have to think Mike Evans is going to get his. He's had 9 straight 1,000-yard seasons, 8 straight 1,000-yard seasons, something like that. He's played with
a lot of quarterbacks,
a lot of different guys, but he is on the other side of 30 now, or getting pretty damn close to it. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I don't think Baker moves the needle for me to be like high on either one of those guys necessarily.
Yeah, I didn't change. My rankings did not move from this announcement. And quite frankly, I don't know if Baker has that job all year long. I wouldn't mind seeing Kyle Trask, and I think Tampa Bay probably will be in the running for a quarterback in the next NFL draft.
Yep.
Let's talk running back. I think this has this next piece of news, like I think it has an impact on the quarterback that we're going to talk about today. But I'll let you share the news.
Yep. The Indianapolis Colts have allowed Jonathan Taylor permission to seek a trade per Adam Schefter. There's already been 6 teams that have reached out to the Colts and 2 that have made offers.
2 already.
Was the latest report.
Like, are they just going to take whatever offer at this point just to get rid of him?
Well, Jim Irsay, he's the talking head out there. Basically, what he said is he wants a first-round draft pick, which he's high out of his mind if he thinks any NFL team is sending a first or even a second for a running back.
He didn't use a first-round draft pick to get him.
Right. It's not equal value there. I think at most, Indy maybe gets a third and another late-round pick. Maybe a team sends a second-round pick over to them with, like, a pick coming back with Taylor. Like, that would be the only scenario I see where where a team would send, like a 5th or a 6th or a 4th even. Yeah. So, I mean,
what do you think about the Chiefs? Do you think they're involved?
I would be totally shocked. It
doesn't seem like a Veach thing. I feels like the Chiefs are always brought up by the national media. But like, I don't think they're ever honestly involved.
The Chiefs are super popular, always getting talked about, at least at this point now. It's just a way to gain some more traction on social media. I feel like at this point, it's like content creators like us, we're going to talk. Do you think the Chiefs trade? Do you think they'll do this or that? I'm not buying into it. I don't think you already said it's not Veach's MO to go and seek out. Really, mid-season trades haven't really been a big thing for him unless they're like a castaway first-round pick. So we saw it with Kadarius Toney last year. I would be super shocked if we got him. There are a couple teams I think would be interested. Minnesota would be interesting. I think you and I were texting about that one earlier this week, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And then, there's just a lot of running back situations where he would be a benefit if he were to join in on them. Like, could you imagine him in Buffalo maybe? where he'd be able to really flourish out there. They've already dealt a running back to Buffalo recently in Nyheim Hines. Maybe they send another one over there and they get Damian Harris back, kind of like how they did the RB swap last time with Zach Moss and Hines. So I don't know. There's a lot of options out there for him, I think.
Yeah, obviously I don't want him to go to Miami, just selfishly because I have so much A-chain.
Please.
The Rams come to mind with Cam Akers and all of that that's going on. Like, you throw Jonathan Taylor in there with Stafford and Cooper Kupp. What does that offense look like all of a sudden, right? But yeah, there's plenty of options. The Chiefs are could they use a running back? Of course. Anybody could use Jonathan Taylor. Like, if you're not the Falcons, the 49ers, the Chargers, or the Browns, or Tennessee, I would, whatever, throw in Derrick Henry. Like, if you're not one of those teams, like, you could use Jonathan Taylor, right? So I'm surprised, the number is only 6, honestly. But real quick, and I know we got to jump into quarterbacks here. I don't want to spend too much time on the news, but we're drafting. We're talking draft strategies today. We're drafting this weekend. How are you handling Jonathan Taylor and this news in your drafts this weekend?
I don't think it changes my approach, which has been, I don't really like to draft Jonathan Taylor this year. I mean, you and I have talked about it already. We're not really big on RBs early anyway. And in the second round, middle of the second round, if I'm taking a running back, the last thing I'm trying to do is take one with question marks around him. So Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, those are 2 running backs I've not even come close to drafting. Like, too many question marks for me. I'm not touching. I'll let somebody else either reach for him or reap the benefits if he does end up popping off and having himself a good season. I'd rather play a little bit safer and grab another wide receiver in that range. And the range he's getting taken, I think his ADP is like 16 or 17 right now. I mean, you can get guys like Jalen Waddle. You can get maybe CeeDee Lamb if he falls far enough. I mean, there's a lot of Saquon Barkley, I think, is a safer running back option being drafted around that general area. So, I mean, those are all guys that I would look at well before Taylor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If he does fall, say he falls to the front end of the 3rd round, if he does that in your drafts, which is probably not likely in a home draft, that's definitely happening in like basketball drafts and those things. But if he falls in your home redraft league that far, I wouldn't mind taking a stab at him, because as soon as he's traded, his most likely his value goes way up, right? Because he's on the Colts right now. The Colts are supposed to be fine, but not necessarily a great team. We like a couple pieces for fantasy, but not necessarily a great team. And so I do think that once he is traded, his value will go up a little bit. But it'll just be interesting to see how, where his ADP ends up this weekend, especially if we don't get news before we all start drafting this weekend. If we get that news this weekend, you better believe I won't be touching him, because he'll go, if he goes to, say, the Bills, right? He goes to the Bills, somebody's going to take him in the 1st round.
Top 5.
But why? Like, the Bills are a passing offense, Josh Allen runs, but just the stigma around, holy cow, this guy just went to a great offense. I'm taking it, But if it doesn't happen before the weekend and he does fall into the 3rd round, I might start to think about it at that point. But right now, I haven't moved in my rankings. I do think that I would move him down just right this moment, but I'm sure I would move him right back up once we actually have the dust settling there. Real quick, I'll finish this out. Corey Davis does retire, which was a little surprising. He's only 27.
Yeah, it's his 6th season.
Yeah, we've had some fun with Corey Davis over the years. He's given us a few games here and there. And then Terry McLaurin, toe issue, right? It looks like maybe a potential turf toe. I found this on Twitter, and I just kind of want to get your thoughts here real fast, and then we'll make it really quick, and then we'll get out of here, or get into quarterbacks out of the news. What do you think about this tweet here by at Fantasy Queen B? Anyone not worried about Terry McLaurin's turf toe injury should look at Devontae Adams' 2019 season. Adams suffers a toe injury In week 4, dealt with the nagging injury all season, finished with 997 yards, 5 touchdowns, missed 4 games, scored below double-digit points in half of the games he played. Obviously, that's a snapshot in time, right? It's just one person, one player that dealt with turf toe, but a great wide receiver. She made some good points. And when I saw that, I'm like, the guy, right? The first reply, Michael Thomas had a nasty case of turf toe as well. Like, are you worried about Terry McLaurin even more now?
You hear about it all the time. Like Mahomes had turf toe in a playoff run 2 seasons ago, or maybe it was even the year we won the Super Bowl. He was dealing with turf toe. Totally different turf toe for a quarterback compared to a wide receiver. So definitely a lot more concern. They're doing a lot more in terms of their activity on the field, a lot more cuts. They're stutter stepping before they break out of their routes, cutting back. There's all these things, all these pieces of all these different movements that they're making where that turf toe would come into play. And even if you start to feel better from it, you can re-aggravate something like that very easily. And a lot of times to really get rid of the issue, you have to have a surgery, which puts you out even longer. So I do agree with a lot of those points. Reading Devontae Adams' stat line with turf toe, it's like, no wonder he's the truth. Almost 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns, and the guy missed 4 games and had turf toe. So that means he at least got hurt in another game and then had to ease himself back in another game. So it's like really 6 games where he's heavily affected by the turf toe. But anyway, not to get too far off the beaten path at this point, it's definitely concerning. It's definitely concerning.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned as well. I like what I've seen from Sam Howell. Just kind of actually makes me want to move Dotson up a little bit more over than anything.
I really like Dotson the best.
Give me some Dotson.
He's the biggest beneficiary, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If McLaurin misses time. It's just a bummer because I feel like Howell's at least like a promising prospect at quarterback and probably the most potential in a quarterback that McLaurin's had his whole career.
Yeah, and you get a little excited there and watching a new offensive coordinator. You've got Sam Howell kind of showing up, and I just hope it's not a lingering issue. Obviously, that's the biggest hope in this situation.
100%. You ready to get into QB rankings, dude?
Let's do it. Absolutely.
So
our last one.
Yeah, I know. Can't believe it. I feels like just yesterday we were like, all right, let's get into some redraft rankings, and now we're already almost here at the season. It's
August is
season's
almost
going to
over.
be here in 15 days.
We're literally 2 weeks away from our first Red Friday on a Wednesday.
Beautiful.
Got to get that flag. Got to go to McDonald's. Get all the flags you can, man.
Absolutely. I can't wait. Well, you want to go in first or I can? It's your call, brother.
Oh, I'll jump in first. Just because I got something a little different than you. I've got at the very top, you and I are actually very aligned with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen at 1 and 2. Where we get a little bit different here, I've got my man Lamar Jackson. He fits the brand. He fits everything I love in quarterbacks. I do have him above Patrick Mahomes. I do not think he's a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. Obviously he has the ability to rush for 1,000 yards in a season, which I absolutely love when it comes to quarterbacks just in general. Last year, through 8 weeks of the season, Lamar Jackson was the QB3. Josh Allen was ahead of him by quite a bit, who just started off smoking hot last year. And then Joe Burrow was also ahead of him. But Lamar, 2 40-point weeks in a row to start the year last year in weeks 2 and weeks 3. Everybody remembers that shootout against Miami. The problem with Lamar, and the reason why most people aren't going to rank him this high, is the injuries, which is why what derailed his season last year. Got to stay healthy. But I think you add in Zay Flowers, you add in Odell Beckham Jr. this year, You add in Todd Munchkin there as the offensive coordinator. Munkin. I think it's not Munchkin.
Munkin. Yeah.
He's not Munchkin. Todd Munkin. And you add him in as offense coordinator there. I've just really been in love with this offense, just in general going into this year. And I got Lamar Jackson right back up in my top 4 in tier 1 of quarterbacks.
Yep. I'm not too far off from where you're at with Lamar Jackson, but definitely the injuries swayed my ranking a little bit, for sure. My tier 1, like you said, Hurts, Allen 1, 2, and then I've got Mahomes 3. I just feel like with Josh Allen, the only reason he's not number 1 is because of the turnover potential that he has. He lost a lot of fumbles last year because he was scrambling out of the pocket, kind of an unscripted scrambler is Josh Allen's MO. He doesn't shy away from that contact, which my fear is that's eventually going to catch up with him and we'll get an injury situation going. But the turnovers are definitely the biggest thing, not ranking him number 1 overall for me. Jalen Hurts is essentially putting up similar numbers on the ground, a few more touchdowns than what Josh Allen can do, a few more yards. But he's just playing it so much safer. So that's kind of where I'm at with my top tier. Mahomes at 3. I really just couldn't put any other quarterbacks above him. We saw what he did last year with just a random cast of receivers and Travis Kelce, and dude balled out. Top 3 fantasy quarterback. I mean, what more can you ask for?
Yeah, and he'll continue to ball out. I think he ended up number 1 in total points. Jalen Hurts didn't finish the year there.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, MVP season, and he absolutely. I mean, if he's the first quarterback off the board, especially in our drafts, being here in Kansas City, we're not going to be surprised. But if you're not a Kansas City fan and you're playing fantasy football, listening to us, don't be scared to take a guy like Patrick Mahomes just because we don't have him 1 or 2. I personally just love the running quarterbacks, and you're going to see that through my ranks all throughout tonight. And obviously Mahomes is still going to be great, and he's probably the safest. Knock on wood. I don't want to derail the season by already saying something that's going to put him in a bad spot or jinx him a little bit, but. Out of all these guys, the 4 guys we've talked about the most, he has been on the field the most too. He has been the most consistent. So
yeah,
Josh Allen hasn't really dealt with a whole lot of injuries, but not as consistent as Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts with the injuries, Lamar with the injuries. Another guy that has missed the game here and there for injury. My number 5 quarterback is Justin Fields. I follow that up by 2. I would say more NFL style pocket passing quarterbacks than Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, just phenomenal offenses there with Burrow and Herbert. I go Fields at number 5 though. Look, last year, the first 4 weeks were a little bit sputtery. It really took him some time, but man, if you picked him up on the waiver wire last year, you absolutely loved it. And he killed for you after starting in week 5. Through the end of the year, he missed 2 games. His bye week was in there. But during that stretch, he was the 3rd highest in points per game with 24 points per game. Only the aforementioned Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts was better than him over the back 3 quarters of the season, essentially. So just wipe away those first 4 weeks. This offense, this coaching staff finally just let him play the game. Let him do his thing. He took off with it. Loved what I saw from Justin Fields. Rode him in a league all year long that I pretty well waited to the very end to draft a quarterback, and then I ended up getting Justin Fields off the waiver wires. It was an awesome season for Justin Fields, and I think he follows that up with the top 5 year this year.
No, absolutely. I thought you were going to say the coaching staff let him cook. I was like, oh no. No,
I should have.
No, I was one of those guys that benefited from Fields last year too, right? We had a little dilemma in my playoffs last year. I don't know if you remember, but I was like, should I start Josh Allen or Justin Fields?
That's right.
And it was like both of these matchups are so juicy. I don't know which way to go. I ended up starting Josh Allen, and luckily I did. We won the ship. So, and I don't remember if it would have been any different if I had played Fields, but yeah, I mean, he's balling. For my tier 2, Fields doesn't quite crack it for me. I've only seen 1 year of Fields balling out, and Chicago's offense, while I think it is going to be better, it's still something I want to see a little bit on the field, what that product's going to look like for another season before I'm ready to rock and roll with it. In tier 2, I've got Justin Herbert as my 4th quarterback, Lamar Jackson at 5, and Joe Burrow at 6. So with Justin Herbert, I just feel like he's poised to have another monster year. 5,000 passing yards last year, and I think there's no reason to think he won't do it again. He's got another weapon in Quentin Johnston, and I just feel really good about Justin Herbert this year. Lamar Jackson sits at my 5 spot and Burrow at 6. Jackson's rushing ability definitely keeps him up there for me, kind of like where you had him, but I'm just really big on Herbert this year, kind of elevating or pushing his game further down the line. I just think he's got so much talent and he's so poised, and that offense is stacked up again. The question is whether or not his weapons are going to stay healthy.
Yeah, and that's, honestly, it's probably a guy that I wish I had a little bit more of in best ball right now, just because this offense has such great potential. New offense coordinator, Kellen Moore going over there. And you mentioned the weapons staying healthy. The nice thing is you add a guy like Quentin Johnston. If Mike Williams or when Mike Williams gets hurt this year, you've still got a number 1 caliber wide receiver on the field, right? And so Gerald Everett's back, Austin Eckler's back after all that saga. Even if you lose, Keenan Allen or a Mike Williams, you have a little bit more depth now, and you've already played a full season without those 2 guys. I really like Justin Herbert. And again, the guy I wish I probably had a little bit more of.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note his left tackle is going to be fully healthy and back. Rashawn Slater missed a lot of him last year, and you can tell it hurt that offensive line. So that's a big return for him.
Yeah, I forgot he was out. All right, my tier 3. So we're looking at 8, 9, and 10 for me. Trevor Lawrence right there. I think this Jacksonville offense, bringing in Calvin Ridley, Tank Bigsby, they're just kind of adding to what's already a pretty solid offense, and an offense that really started to click towards the end of last year. Doug Peterson's 2nd year there in Jacksonville. I like Trevor Lawrence. Deshaun Watson, this kind of just feels like this is where he belongs, but I think this guy has probably the highest ceiling once you get into this middle to later top 12, because he's got the top 3 potential. We've seen it in the past. It's just a matter of, does he still have that in him? But Daniel Jones is really the guy that I want to highlight here. I've got him at number 10. Dan, I know we're not going to see him in your list at all when talking top 15 here. But for me, a 2nd year in Brian Daboll's offensive scheme, they bring in Darren Waller. They've got Jalen Hyatt. They drafted Jalen Hyatt's come in. Saquon looks like, obviously he signs the contract. He's going to be back. Everything looks like it's kind of fallen in place here in New York. And again, another guy who's going to use his legs a little bit, ends up as a top 10 quarterback last season. 20-point game in week 16 and a 36-point game in week 17, the week that matters the most for you and your fantasy championship. The guy really ended the season on a heater, had a pretty decent a pretty decent real playoff run as well. He looked okay. Obviously, they played the Eagles, and when you play the Eagles,
you
don't really have much of a chance. But I mean, the guy looked pretty decent, and I really like this offense going into Brian Daboll's 2nd year. So give me another guy who's going to use his feet to gain, 1 to 5 more points every single game for you. from the quarterback position, and I like myself some Danny Dimes.
No, I think that's fair. I think his rushing ability definitely showed like its full potential last year and what that can look like. And if you trust in Dable, which I think a lot of people do, he's going to exploit that as much as possible. So, yeah, I mean, I could see it. I don't think that's a terrible spot for him. He's not in my top 15. It's just not a place that I'm going to go. But for my tier 3, starting with Trevor Lawrence at 7, Justin Fields at 8, Watson 9, Prescott 10. But at number 11, I snuck this guy into tier 3. It's Aaron Rodgers for the New York Jets. We kind of talked about it pre-show, right? There looked to be a little bit of decline last year, but there also was a shortage of weapons compared to what he had the year prior with Devontae Adams shipping out from Green Bay. He finds himself in a much better offensive situation. And maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid from Hard Knocks, but I really like Garrett Wilson. I really like what they have in their supplemental pieces. They have Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, guys he's familiar with, as well as McCole Hardman. Obviously, Corey Davis just retired, or else I would have thrown him in there as well. And then their offensive line is stacked up. Elijah Vera Tucker is one of the better offensive guards. He's coming back, as well as Mekhi Becton's expected to be healthy. And then in their backfield, they've got Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. Tight end, they've got a young rookie guy who's coming up, and then CJ Zoma as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential there in New York for him to really spread that ball around, and it's all talented receivers that are catching the passes from him out there in New York. So, I don't know. I'm a little bit of a fan. I'm not breaking the bank to go draft him or anything like that. I'm aiming for one of these other guys in tier 3, but I think it's worth noting that Rodgers is going to have a top 15 season, in my opinion.
The weapons are there. I'm going to struggle getting on. I have Rodgers, man. QB 21. I have him way down there. A lot of it is just like straight up. I could see him having like a Tom Brady style of year towards his later, towards the end of his career. Like, great for NFL, great for winning ball games, but he's just not going to elevate your fantasy team. That's the way I look at Aaron Rodgers right now. And some of those efficiencies are not so much efficiencies. So deficiencies, right? So, but the offenses are there. I mean, the offensive weapons are there. You hit that on the head. Like, Garrett Wilson's a stud, man. And obviously bringing in Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall is going to be great. So we'll see how that goes. One of us are going to be right on that one, right? He's either going to be there or he won't. But that's where I stand on Aaron Rodgers. Josh in the chat tonight. What's up, Josh? Hopefully we hear from Josh a little bit here this NFL season. Looking forward to potentially hearing some Viking talk out of Josh. Random best ball question related to Rodgers. Does Mecole Hardman? We know Mecole. We know the Mecole Hardman thing. Does he have any value late as a stack with Aaron Rodgers? Dan, you came on the Rumbles of Red last week. Got your first taste of best ball for the season. What do you think about Mecole Hardman there in New York?
I mean, as a stack in best ball late, I don't think it's a terrible play necessarily, right? If you're looking to grab somebody late, you want to pair Rodgers up. Maybe you missed out on Garrett Wilson. You kind of had to pivot, grab Rodgers to put on the team for, a rotational guy. I mean, I don't think it's a bad play. Do I think Mecole Hardman's gonna put up crazy numbers? Absolutely not. I think he's kind of capped at maybe like 500 to 600 yards receiving. Maybe he grabs 4 or 5 touchdowns if he gets lucky. I'd be surprised if he catches more than like 40 passes. That's kind of where the ceiling is for him, in my opinion. I definitely think Lazard and Wilson and Dalvin Cook and Breece out of the backfield end up with more catches and more targets than Mecole Hardman.
Yeah, Hardman going 194 on Underdog currently. So if you are playing best ball, you can hit him up on Underdog. And if you haven't played Underdog before, You always know I've got that promo code, Trevor Steinbacher, all one word. But 194, so you're getting him in round 17, right? So Josh, if you've got Aaron Rodgers earlier in the draft and you just need maybe a double, a second guy to double stack him with, he's going to be there. We all know what Mecole Hardman's there for, right? He is the home run guy. He's going to be the guy who is going to, take a screen to the house for 80 yards or whatnot and potentially add points to your team over the course of the season. He's not necessarily going to be a great redraft type player. You're never going to know when to start him or if you can start him. But those boom or bust style players, even if they bust more often than they boom, are good for best ball because one or two big plays, they could find a spot in your lineup, and those one or two extra points than the next guy has could really help your advance rates later on. So definitely don't mind that. Josh says, makes sense. I have Rodgers in my palm. Superflex is my second quarterback. Really hope it lights it up. So, also as a second quarterback, I could get down with Rodgers there. But in redraft, we'll get back to our redraft rankings here. Dan has Rodgers inside of his 10, top 11.
That's 11.
Top 11. It's got to be inside his top 11. I'll talk about my 12 through 15 here. I've got Dak at 12, Tua at 13, Anthony Richardson, my boy. I have moved him down just a slight. I moved him behind Dak and Tua mostly because of the Jonathan Taylor stuff. Not 100% sure how that's going to affect the offense overall. He's not going to have that safety blanket. So moved him down a little bit, but still love Anthony Richardson this year. Kirk Cousins at 14, Jared Goff coming in at number 15. Dan, one quarterback played at least 13 games last year and had 5.9 air yards per attempt. So that's the amount of yards the ball was in the air on every pass attempt. These guys go for the deep ball and go for the deep ball often. I love Tua in this offense. Anytime you can throw deep to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, man, load up. Why not? Just get after it. Yes, obviously the concussions and all of that was terrible last year. I think truly that's the only reason he's so far down in rankings. He's so far down in ADP is because of those concussions, and rightfully so. But if he plays all 18 or 17 games last year, he probably ends up as a top 7 quarterback, and we're probably talking about him way higher in our rankings. Unfortunately, he doesn't. He ends up as a top 15 quarterback instead overall. And I was going to see what he was in a per game basis, like a per week basis for the rankings, because I bet he was up there quite a bit, man. The style of offense this team's going to play, Tua's just going to load up and bomb it to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, and I just love that.
Man, and the thing is, there's nothing any defense can do to stop it. You're not stopping both of those guys. And then they had some third options that were catching some bombs too. So, I mean, God, that offense is going to be nuts again. I actually Tua is one of my low key, I'm really hyped on him kind of guys. If I'm looking at my tier 4, I'm starting with Cousins at 12. Tua is also sitting in my 13 spot. I shifted gears again from where you're at and put Derek Carr at number 14. That New Orleans Saints offense is looking pretty damn good to me as well. You got Chris Olave, Michael Thomas coming back. They've got Jawan Johnson, the red zone touchdown machine at tight end. And then you still have Alvin Kamara, Miller, and Jamal Williams in the backfield. Plus their offensive line still pretty stellar. From what I saw, even just in Derek Carr in the preseason game against the Chiefs, they look like they were clicking. They look like they were feeling good, and sort of chemistry was getting built out with one another. The way I look at it is, when I'm putting these rankings together, if I'm facing this quarterback or this quarterback, who am I taking in a situation? I'm going with Carr over a lot of the guys, all of the guys behind him. I just had to make sure that he was in my top 15. And I also want to make sure Anthony Richardson was in there. I think he has a lot of potential in this Colts offense. So that's where I slot him at 15.
Yeah, Derek Carr. I mean, my reasoning, I only have him like 1 or 2 spots down. So he's not far out of my top 15. But my main concern here is he had all those things in Las Vegas as well, right? He had Darren Waller and Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. And he ended up at like top 17, top 20 quarterback. Like he's never put it together to where he is a fantasy value or he's the fantasy asset you need. He has, however, provided great fantasy value for his pass catchers. Very similar like a Jimmy G. Like Jimmy G is, I think Jimmy G is like the Kroger, like the great value portion of Derek Carr. Derek Carr is better than Jimmy G, but they both do the same thing. They're very good NFL quarterbacks. They're not great. They're not necessarily going to put you, on their back like some of these other guys that we talked about will, but they're going to be good enough and serviceable enough that their pass catchers and the weapons around them will still be good for fantasy. That's kind of how I see Derek Carr as well. I was going to bring up, though, Titans, you don't like that to start the season. Panthers, Packers, Buccaneers, Patriots. So you're not like in love with the first 5 games there. You don't hate it. So keep an eye out because Derek Carr might get dropped pretty quickly if things don't go perfect the first couple weeks. And then at
hot take,
Jaguars, Colts, Bears, Vikings, like now you've got a bunch of just trash defenses after that first 5 weeks. So it could be, he's not going to run like a Justin Fields, but look for him on the waiver wires after those first couple weeks because they truly are playing some really bad football teams this year. And that schedule gets pretty spicy for you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could almost say that with all the Saints players. Keep, maybe the trade values or whatever go down because it opens up and there's not a defense on here until maybe the Rams in December, like late December. So
I don't even want to give them that kind of respect.
I don't think they're there anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
outside
after
of
that
Aaron
Patriots
Donald,
game,
I'm not in on much of that talent on the Rams defense.
It's just it's here like Bears, Vikings, Falcons, Lions, Panthers, Giants. Like it's just all bad defenses, some good offenses, and just I could see them being in a couple shootouts here.
Yeah,
as you go. So keep a lookout. Obviously, I don't like the first couple. Get through that Patriots game and see how Derek Carr does after that.
Love it. Top 15, man. That's what it's looking like.
Yeah, I like him. I think we do. I think we're pretty spot on with him. I don't mind having the differences. That's for sure. Gives us a little bit different perspective on things. And I'm probably too low on Rodgers. I'll be honest.
No, I'm probably too low on Daniel Jones. That's the one I'll concede on a little bit. I just he finished like top 10 last year as a fantasy quarterback. His rushing game is just so good. I don't know, for whatever reason I can't get behind it. Can't get behind it.
Number 9. Well, let's talk some draft strategy here. If you're in the chat with us tonight, thank you for hanging out. We are going to try to provide some draft strategies, answer a couple of our own questions that prompted. But if you have any questions, if you've got a draft coming up, maybe you already know what draft spot you're sitting in, and you kind of want a little bit of advice around the draft spot, whatever the case is, throw it in the chat tonight. We would love to be able to give you a little advice here live. Dan, right back to the quarterbacks, though. Who's your favorite quarterback? We've done this with all the positions, right? Just kind of feeling this out. Who's your favorite quarterback to draft based on their average draft position?
For me right now, it's Trevor Lawrence. He's one of the upper echelon kind of quarterbacks. He's like, in my opinion, the very back part of that upper echelon sort of like Lamar Jackson, Burrow, Herbert-esque kind of guys. I have him ranked 7th. Currently, he's like the 8th quarterback coming off the board, according to the ADP chart I was looking at. 58 overall. I've been seeing him anywhere from mid-fifth to late fourth, kind of in that range, which if you're hitting him mid-fifth, my favorite part about Trevor Lawrence at this spot is he is one of the best quarterbacks to get a stack going with in redraft leagues, because you can either take Calvin Ridley and maybe the third, come back around and take Trevor Lawrence in the fifth. Or if you missed out on Calvin Ridley earlier in the draft, you can get Christian Kirk in the very next round, in like the sixth round, maybe even seventh, to round out that little Jaguars stack for your redraft team. That's probably the easiest quarterback to get a stack with if you're looking at the top 8 quarterbacks, outside of maybe, Justin Fields and DJ Moore. You can get that going pretty easy. Maybe you get a T. Higgins, Joe Burrow stack going. Other than that, the most valuable one, the one that's going to be easiest to grab is Herbert Ridley or Herbert Kirk. Or I'm sorry, Lawrence Ridley or Lawrence Kirk.
Yeah. And right now I was looking at ESPN ADP. I like ESPN's ADP when we talk redraft, strictly because that's where I would say the majority of like your regular, I don't do anything but get into my 1 league or 2 leagues a year, right? They're not thinking about this. I feel like most everybody uses ESPN. I know you and I use a lot of sleeper app. I use my fantasy league for things, NFL app, but I just think that ESPN still has the most people using it. And these people are just now starting to draft. Sleeper, people are drafting on Sleeper, man, all off season long.
I know.
So while that has good ADP information, sometimes I'm like, it could be slow or whatnot. Right now, they've got Trevor Lawrence as QB8 at pick 68 on average. So even a little bit further down than what you're talking, and nearly 20 spots after the guy I'm about to talk about in Justin Fields. So that's a pretty big break. So you can really, anytime the fifth round starts, you could pretty well take Trevor Lawrence anytime you want over the 5th or 6th round. It sounds like on ESPN. So you got to love that value there. I'm talking Justin Fields here. He's my quarterback 5. I just talked about him. He's going off the board at quarterback 7, right in front of your boy, Trevor Lawrence. His ADP right now is 50, so right at the front end of that 5th round. And especially if I'm sitting on that 4 or 5 turn, I'm definitely slamming Justin Fields as my QB1 if possible. And honestly, I'm at that point, because Lamar's starting to sneak up, I really like Lamar at the 3-4 turn the most. But now that he's kind of sneaking up more into the middle of the 3rd, I like Justin Fields here at the 4 or 5 turn. Grab your guy. You can stack him with DJ Moore, as you mentioned. You can stack him late with a Cole Kmet if you want to stack him, or you can just run Justin Fields because he runs the ball all over the place anyway. So give me some Justin Fields in draft strategy there.
Love it. I think I've been seeing him go right about that same spot that you mentioned, right? Early 5th, late 4th. That's great value. At that point. If you're hitting him in the 5th round, you've probably already snagged a good receiver or 2. You probably have a nice tight end or a solid running back at that point. Maybe you've grabbed a 3rd receiver, and now you can grab your quarterback who's got one of the higher ceilings out of any of the quarterbacks that you can select. So I really like that pick.
Yeah, that pocket of the draft, you already like having the 1 or 2, right? Like, obviously, you love getting Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. If you want to take, one of those other guys, you can. But if you got the 1 or 2, you're taking one of those guys, you're coming back around like the 2-3 turn, whatever wide receiver wants to fall to you, whatever running back you want. Maybe you take Mark Andrews. The 4-5 turn, you get Justin Fields. I mean, you could really start with some pretty dominant players.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just kind of moving it into some of these questions that we have, we've seen a couple of quarterbacks getting taken in the first, 2 rounds. I've seen Mahomes get snagged in the first round on a lot of mocks, or Josh Allen on that 1-2 turn. Jalen Hurts being another one. Is there any is there any strategy that you would trust that calls for taking a quarterback in the first 2 rounds? And if not, when's your ideal scenario to target one? Is it the 5th with Justin Fields, or is there another guy that you're targeting strategy wise?
Yeah, redraft leagues, I'm not touching a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. If I bring up best ball a lot just because it's something I do all summer long. You have to just switch it up a little bit, but we're full on redraft season at this point. And when I'm going into my drafts this weekend, I know from the very beginning I'm not touching a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. I get it; they're elite. All 3 of them are elite quarterbacks. They're very consistent. They're great quarterbacks. They're always going to be there. But, man, you can get so much value at quarterback later on that, I mean, we talked about Justin Fields picking him up off the waiver wire and running with him all season long. Yeah. You've seen guys in the past. Daniel Jones ends up as a top 10 quarterback last year. Geno Smith was even drafted last year, top 6 quarterback last year. There's so much value at the quarterback position. I'll stream them all year long if I have to. Now, in your second part of your question, where am I starting to target them? Look, Lamar Jackson back into the 3rd round. I don't mind that as much, right? I've already gotten 2 stud wide receivers. Now I can get a Lamar Jackson. I don't mind that. I just talked about Justin Fields a little bit there. And honestly, if I get through them and it just doesn't work out for me, I'm probably just waiting it out and just kind of seeing how the rest of the board falls to me. If I find some good value somewhere, I might jump on one, but I'm probably just going to wait it out there. But what are your thoughts here with guys like Hurts and Allen and Mahomes going in the top 2 rounds? Are you going to take one of those guys and try to just be elite at that position, or are you going to wait it out?
I mean, so for my draft on Sunday, it's a keeper league. So really, you're already planning on 10 guys being snagged out of the pool. So that moves everyone's ADP up. And so it kind of changes the way that you need to put your draft strategy together. Right now, I'm at pick 8. If I hit that turn and the 3 receivers that I want are gone, there's maybe a solid chance that I go quarterback there. Other than that, like for a traditional redraft league, no keeper involved, there's not any situation where I'd be taking a guy in the 2nd. Now, if it's at that 2-3 turn and maybe Josh Allen's on the board, Mahomes is on the board, it would surprise me a ton, being as it's a home league. But if one of those 2 guys are there in the 3rd round, early 3rd, I think there's a good chance I snag them if I feel good about the receivers that I have, or if there's a potential for me to get a stack going there. Like maybe I take, I don't know, if it could be a situation where I got AJ Brown in the 2nd, I come back around and snag Jalen Hurts in the 3rd. Yeah, I think that'd be a pretty attractive situation. But the 2nd round's a little early for me. Ideally, I'm not taking a quarterback until like round 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. I feel like the whole reason people want to take quarterbacks early is to get that elite quarterback. I think quarterback's a lot different than, say, like a tight end. There's one reason Travis Kelce is being drafted in the 1st round. I mean, multiple, right? Because he's the greatest tight end of all time. He's freaking phenomenal. He's awesome. But it's the positional scarcity, right? If you're not getting Kelce or Andrews or Hawkinson or Kittle and maybe Waller and Pitts, like, you're not getting a guy who could be elite.
Right.
Quarterbacks, especially right now in the NFL, we talked our top 15 tonight. I mean, I'm happy if I'm just looking at ADP. I'm happy with top 8, top 9 just by ADP of like. I mean, I could write a story why this guy was the number 1 quarterback this year. Right? Even all the way down to your Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. So like you could see it. And so I just don't feel like there's like the urgency to go get Patrick Mahomes in a redraft league when you can, get Justin Herbert in the 5th round or the 4th round or whatever. It's just, I don't feel that urgency. And so, my advice has always been and will continue to be, don't draft quarterbacks that early. And quite frankly, feel comfortable like waiting it out the whole way. Like I would not mind just waiting until round 9 or 10 and taking Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, Russell Wilson with Sean Payton there now. Like I'm not going to feel like I have to take any of these guys at the top.
Everyone's kind of forgetting about Russell Wilson a little bit, I feel like.
Yeah. He's cheap.
Yep.
Tua's cheap. Tua's
Anthony Richardson's pretty cheap.
Daniel Jones in the 10th round on ESPN, Tua in the 9th round, Anthony Richardson in the 12th round. You can get guys later. Jared Goff is way late.
Yep. I went to the Super Bowl last year with Kirk Cousins on one of my teams. So
Kirky was a top 12 quarterback last year, I believe.
Yep.
7th, ended 7th overall.
We love it.
So, yes, it's great. It feels good. It feels warm. It feels fuzzy to get one of these guys, but it's not necessary. It really isn't. And think about the positional value you're giving up. You know, are you not drafting T. Higgins, and now you end up drafting, maybe you're drafting a Michael Pittman or Terry McLaurin later on. Cool names, like guys that you like, but they're not T. Higgins. They're not Devontae Smith, those kind of guys. Dan, let's go on to the next question here. Most important piece of advice when it comes to draft strategy. Most important piece of advice. You have what's the one thing you always tell people? Your buddies are asking you, you're walking down the street, somebody recognizes, oh, you're Dan, right, from ADP. Tell me about this draft strategy. What is it?
It might seem pretty generic, but for me, it's stick to the plan. Like, if you go into a draft, you know the strategy you want to roll with, you know who your guys are, don't second guess it, because that's when you get into a situation when you end up drafting somebody out of position, and that has a chain reaction. Right? When you take a running back at a certain point, now when you get value for another running back later down the road, you're not going to roll with it because you feel like you're already set, or you already have too many of that position on your team. Stick to the plan. You know what I mean? Trust your gut on it and roll with whatever strategy you're coming into it with.
Yeah, I like that a lot. If you are here with us in the chat, thanks for being here. You got a couple more minutes to throw in your draft strategy questions. If you've got them, throw them in. If you already know what position you're drafting from, let us know. We'll kind of navigate that with you. Dan, great advice there. My number one piece of advice is kind of on the same, but it's just let the draft fall to you, right? I know I'm going to be drafting wide receivers early. It might be, an AJ Brown the second round that I'm not, I don't expect, or it might be, I need to reach a little bit for a wide receiver because they're all going off, right? So my plan is to take a wide receiver, but I need to let the draft fall to me, see how it goes before I lock in that pick. Quarterbacks are going off super early. That's okay, right? Just write it out. Take a guy a little bit later on. You don't have to deviate from the plan. You just allow the draft to fall to you, see how it goes, get a feel for your league mates, especially if it's the first time you guys have ever drafted together. Otherwise, most of my drafts we've been in for I guess 10, 15 years at this point. I'm getting a little older, apparently. So I'm like, holy cow. But I kind of have an idea what their tendencies are as well. I know who their favorite teams are. I know who their favorite players are. And look, we're all human, whether we act like we wouldn't do that or not. We're going to still take our guys, and we're going to still have some fun with the game. So know your draft mates, know your league mates, and let that draft, just let it fall to you, man. Just don't reach for people, just reach for them. Let it come to you. It'll happen.
That's so funny you say that. I in the league I do with my family, it's hilarious. My grandmother she's played every season with us, and one of the things that she'll do is draft a guy just because he has a funny name or like an interesting name. So CD Lamb, she is gonna grab CD Lamb any chance she can get just because his name's CD. Like, you just understand people a little bit better when you've been in leagues with them for so long. And it's just so funny whenever you can sort of like, it's almost like they don't have a great poker face and you can read them a little bit better. And that helps you play your hand so much easier.
Especially if you're drafting right around them.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Like you're drafting right after her. CD's sitting there. You're like, all right, most
I
likely
know
she's
he's
taking
not going to come
CD,
to me.
so I can start looking elsewhere.
Right. Exactly.
That's good stuff. Oh, CD Lamb. Also, shout out to your grandma, man. Playing a little fantasy football. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, she didn't have a great year last year, but the year before she had the best record in league history. Baller.
Give it up for grandma. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. All right. Next question here, Dan. We kind of talked a little bit about this earlier. Now I can't remember if it was pre-show or just the beginning of the show. But do you target different players or different types of players early versus late in the draft? So are you changing your strategy the first 6 picks versus the next 6 picks?
Well, it kind of goes back to that draft advice I just put out, which is like stick to the plan. So typically my approach to a redraft league is grab 2 solid receivers in the first 2 rounds, whether it's round 1, 2, or 3, your choice on how that goes. And it goes back to what you said, let the draft fall. So I know in these first 3 rounds, I'm coming away with 2 receivers I feel I can start on a week in, week out basis. That third player is going to depend how the draft falls. I may go tight end. I may go quarterback depending on how that falls. And I might go running back depending on how that falls. But I know for a fact in those first 3 rounds, I'm taking 2 receivers. After that, I'm looking for a flex play and or a tight end and or a quarterback or a second running back in the next 3. So the first 6 rounds, ideally, I have my quarterback, 2 receivers, a solid flex player, and at least 1 running back and a tight end. That's what I like to get done in the first 6. The next 6 plus is just filling out depth. So I may go to 2 rounds in a row grabbing running backs, depending on how things fell the first 6 rounds. Probably grab another receiver. One rule that I always will abide by, if you're in a league with team defenses and kickers, draft those 2 positions the very last 2 rounds, okay? Take all the value that you can in rounds 14 through 10 when people start drafting their kickers and team defenses, because without fail, Justin Tucker is going to go in the 10th round. You're going to see the top defense come off the board.
49ers are going to come out.
11 or 12, and you're going to be able to get a guy like Dalton Kincaid because somebody decided to take Justin Tucker instead. Don't be that sucker that takes a kicker too early.
Dude, right now, 49ers defense, average pick of 77.
That's
77.
Asinine.
Stupid.
Totally.
Now, they're freaking legit, but man, defense is so volatile. Like you
can string defenses all year and be totally fine. Like if I draft a defense in the last round just because I like their week 1 matchup, I'm totally fine with that, because then I can drop them, pick up another defense based on their matchup, and do that literally all year long.
Now you're rolling. Rolling. Yeah, the only thing that I would say, I mean, I have a little bit of a strategy early on. One of my kind of cardinal rules is if I'm going to take usually in a redraft league, I'm going to take 1 of the onesie positions in the first 5 rounds. So if I take a tight end, that means I'm probably just streaming quarterbacks. If I take a quarterback, I'll just punt tight end. I'll go after it later after round 5. I mean, if I come out of round 5 with 4 wide receivers and a tight end, or 3 wide receivers and a quarterback and a running back, like that's what I'm trying to do through the first 5 rounds or so. And then after that, it's all about upside. I want to look for guys, get your studs early, right? Your studs, but maybe your safe studs, because you can kind of lose your draft early if you really screw it up. But you can't win your league, right? Like you're not going to win your league with Justin Jefferson. You have to have more than Justin Jefferson.
It helps,
right?
but
If that was the case, we just end after the first pick. But yes, it'll absolutely help you get there. But you can't only win it just with him. You have a whole season to manage this team with. So I want to look for anybody with upside, high upside guys, rookie type wide receivers, JSN, Jordan Addison, right? Kind of those 0 RB style guys like Rashad Penny, Brian Robinson, Devin A-Chain, these guys who could be running back 1s on their team, but they're going in the rounds 8 and 9. I don't necessarily want to take an RB2 on a team in those rounds. I want to take guys who are either committees that could be the RB1, or guys like A-Chain who just straight up could be the RB1 in those later rounds. So that's what I'm just looking for, guys I feel like have high ceilings, because ideally I'm not necessarily starting them right off the cusp, right? I don't need JSN to be great in the first couple weeks because I just drafted 3 great running wide receivers to start the draft. So that's kind of what I look at late, is just straight up just trying to find those guys with the highest ceilings out there. Dan, one last question here and we'll get out of here. How's that sound?
Yeah, buddy.
One more draft strategy question, and it's around your rankings. We just went through 4 weeks of positional rankings. Tell the people, how should they be utilizing rankings, whether it's our rankings, other people's rankings? How do you use rankings while you're drafting?
I think it's important to use those rankings not as law, but as suggestions for your own strategy. Obviously, go in and trust your gut. You're going to feel out certain players the way that you want to feel them out. But it's going to give you a good idea as to, what the public perception is of that player compared to what you have, and also helps you put tendencies together for other people you're drafting with. So if you're looking at a list of ADP for players from a certain website, that's telling you what the public thinks of that particular player, so you can game plan around that. So really, it should be seen as more suggestions and as opposed to guidelines. That way you can kind of anticipate and predict how the draft is going to go a little bit easier. That's how I take it, at least.
Yeah, that's great advice, in my opinion. I tier-based draft, so I take my top 200 I have, and I kind of just highlight or outline, I guess, like, okay, these 7 players. For example, just at the very top, I've got Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Hill, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler. Like, to me, that's all one tier. I've got the wide receivers ahead of the running backs. But if it so happens I have the 6th pick and, the running back or all the wide receivers are gone, I could go ahead and take Eckler, or maybe I can move to my next tier because I know, the next round I don't have very many wide receivers or whatnot. Like, you could kind of look at later on in the draft when you're in round 4 or 5, you got a tier. If I'm sitting down there and I've got a tier here in the middle of the draft of George Kittle, J.K. Dobbins, Kenny Walker, Miles Sanders, Michael Pittman. I've got a bunch of wide receivers. Most of those guys are gone except for Kenny Walker and Michael Pittman. Even if I have Pittman ranked ahead of Walker, I'm good at wide receiver. I've got him in the same tier. Maybe I take Walker in that situation. So it just allows me to kind of navigate in almost like ranks of, like, I don't know, depending on the tier, 5 to 10 guys at a time.
Yeah.
Instead of, nope, Michael Pittman's my next guy on my list, I'm taking him. well, shit, now you got 7 wide receivers. Like, that doesn't help your team either. So I kind of just group them up and put them in a tier. So when I get to those positions, I can kind of see, like, all right, I have one guy ranked over the other guy, but really I kind of put them in the same bucket, same tier.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter at that point. And it kind of just helps me keep my strategy going, keep my plan going as I go throughout the draft. So that's kind of how I use rankings. And I just, even if I don't take my own, even if I want to go to ESPN or somewhere and actually find a professional who gets paid a lot of money to do this, and I want to use their rankings, I'll still go through their rankings and outline my tiers within their rankings.
No, I love that. I think it's a good way to sort of bracket out what those players are. And it's funny you said that, because I didn't really think of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense. When I do my rankings, for me personally, I will actually tier out the players for each position, and I kind of highlight them on my little spreadsheet, like green, yellow, orange, red is my code. And I'm like, okay, I know I need to have a green, at least 3 greens, a couple of yellows, which is that tier 2 kind of player. And you can kind of build your roster out that way and help you like target people a little bit better. So I really like that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Gotta love the tiers. Gotta use the rankings however you want. If you want to use our rankings, guys, get into our Discord. Get into the Bite Size Sports Discord. You can find the link in the episode description here below. Dan and I both have committed. We will be putting in our rankings into that Discord, so you can have a sneak peek at them before you draft this weekend. Probably by position, but even if it's by position, just gives you kind of an idea of where we're sitting with our rankings. We've gone 4 episodes with this now. We started with tight ends back at the beginning of August. We have worked up to the quarterbacks tonight, and some things are going to change. Our rankings might be a little different, but I don't think our strategies are changing. So if you kind of want a little bit more around strategy with positional thoughts around that, what are we going to do with running backs? What are we going to do with wide receivers? Make sure you go back, check out those shows. They're on the audio feed on Spotify or Apple, or also just go back to the YouTube channel at Bite Size Sports and check them out there, because I do think that we go in depth in some of those positions pretty well and just kind of talk about why we think about zero or anchor RB. Why do we love the wide receivers so much more than the running backs early in the draft? So go check those out if you want a little bit more draft strategy.
Absolutely. No, I'm excited to get those rankings put in there and build them out a little bit deeper than what we put on the show. Obviously, we have time constraints, so it'll be a little more extensive whenever we plug those into the Discord. So make sure you get in there. Trevor and I were going to be active in that channel all season long, so it'll be an opportunity for you guys to kind of bounce some content ideas off of us, maybe some questions that we can address during the shows as we move through the season. And then, of course, once we get to Sunday morning, bounce those lineups off of us in there as well.
Great opportunity to get any of your last minute start set questions in, because we're on Wednesday nights, y'all. So it's a great time, middle of the week, but you're not necessarily setting your lineups until Sunday morning or whatever.
Right.
And I know I'll be setting my lineups as well. So I'll be sitting there active in the Discord, setting my own lineups, answering your questions. So jump on in there with us. It's going to be a lot of fun this NFL season.
Yep, I'm pumped for it. Well, let's give it the old sign off.
Let's get out of that's right.
Yes,
let's get out of here. Well, follow me on Twitter at TrevorS_FF. Rumbles of Red this Friday night, 8:15 Central, right here on the Bite Size Sports YouTube channel. On Facebook at the Rumbles of Red, Facebook at Bite Size Sports. James Schmeitz of The Bounce, our Bite Size Titans podcast that's about to start up with all of our NFL podcasts. James, a longtime friend of mine, old college roommates back at Wichita State in the old wheat fields of the Shocker Town. So come hang out with us on Friday night. See if he makes me draft Derrick Henry. I dodged the bullet with Dan last week as our draft spots. Derrick Henry just didn't fall back to us. So hopefully I can dodge the bullet one more time with James. So make sure you check me out Friday night, 8:15 Central, with James. That should be a lot of fun.
Heck yeah. It was a lot of fun last Friday, kind of going through all that and doing best ball draft with you. So you'll want to definitely tune in for that because it's always a little bit of a party and you can crack a cold one as you kind of go through it, which is always fun too.
Friday night's the best.
Absolutely. Make sure you give me a follow on Twitter or IG at Dan_TF40 for both of those. At the fastest _40 is my other show. We're about to get things kicked up here in the next couple weeks. Going to be a lot of fun going through that. Make sure you follow ADP on Twitter at ADP podcast _FF. And of course, give Bite Size Sports a follow so you can check out all of that content we're putting out throughout the year and just about every single sport. So it's at Bite _Size Sports, and give us those reviews on Spotify and Apple. We'll see you next week.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting